Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This was the final day of the LEC of the first week. It is currently 2 a.m. I went out to spend some time with some of the other casters before I started recording. So, my tiredness, I have myself to blame. Well, I always do, but this time around, a little bit more. Today was rather uneventful beyond the first game. I think we had some very one sided matchups in terms of the bottom five teams fighting the top five teams. In theory, if we look by the potential standings and how we would rate each individual performance, I think that the banger of the day was, of course, SK versus Australis. Both of them came into the match 2-0. SK versus Australis, I really liked SK's read here on Australis. I think that Australis did show some patterns, and you could see here that the Veigar was the third layer of that pattern. I think that the first pick Sejuani with the Elise ban was a very interesting take with the Zaya and Varus bans, just to kind of create a situation where Australis needs to peel the layers of the onion. I think that locking Veigar and Vi is once again showing this pattern that Australis is looking to go for. It's either they get Seju Elise in the jungle, or maybe they can play some other AP jungles, and then in this case, the fact that they pick Veigar gives them a lot more flexibility on what to pick mid lane. Of course, in this case, Zeri, Lucian, Caitlyn, Zaya, Varus is banned, so it definitely opens up the AD carry pool. We saw many Senna, not many, but we saw Senna Cho'Gath in that spot. Aphelios is the 180 that is constantly picked here as well. All in all, Veigar I think was a decent champion in this game. Veigar, Vi, and the Pyke on 3, I think that's a very decent combination. I think that Pyke can definitely create enough pressure around the mid in order to transfer that into Veigar, and Veigar can thin out waves, and even in scenarios where you play 2v2, you do have some kill potential, so I really like the pairing. Aphelios Annie was locked in. Here, some people might think, oh, where's the Ashe prior and so forth, but I think Ashe is definitely something that has gotten worse with the strengthening of the melee supports, and followed by the fact that the AD item was nerfed. An additional layer to it is that a lot of the AD carries that you would match with an Ashe was also banned in this game, like the Caitlyn, like the Varus, sometimes even Zeri, right? And that's also an additional layer to it. So they slammed Aphelios and they picked Annie. Annie, of course, flex here, but you usually want something Annie, like if you're playing Annie mid, you'd rather have a jungler that has a lot of burst. Like Annie Lee Sin is a very common combo. Like you should treat Annie as if you have like LeBlanc mid, Ahri mid. You need to be very strong in the 2v2 to really leverage the strength of Annie. Olaf, Sion, 4-5 bans. I think these are decent bans. Olaf with the immunity to CC. Also, Olaf is very good into the champion pool that Leader has, I would say. And then Sion, just because you're not going to have, even though Veigar does decent amount of DPS, Sion with the ultimate, you don't have counterplay really there. When you're playing like Veigar of High Pike, if that's your 1-2-3, then banning Sion does make sense. They went Jackson 4, which has been a decent blind. I thought here I predicted that SK are going to look to pick Lucius Renekton into Jax because they have Sejuani, but Relevant shows once again that he's willing to be very flexible for the sake of his team. So it boils down, this decision to go Lee Sin Rakan, it boils down to the idea of making sure that you have a very strong 2v2, very strong 3v3 on bottom side, and also very strong 3v3 around mid. So all the Lee Sin games that you see are going to be heavy fighting around mid lane. Silas was 5th pick. I think Australis had a decent draft here, but if you fall behind in such a draft, you're very short range because you're 4 melee champs, right? And then you have Veigar. It's just that you have to kind of fight your way out of it. And if enemy Lee Sin is ahead, like he had basically Go Drinker in this game at 8 minutes, it becomes very tricky. So this game really, really boiled down to what happened in the mid lane. We had, of course, the 2v2, like the gank attempt on Annie. Sadly, Silas didn't have enough mana to pursue. Vi also, the timing on the way they went on Annie was not ideal because the wave was slowly crashing and Silas wanted to go. And then Vi couldn't connect, which bought enough time for Lee Sin to react. He waited for the stun to be online, and Annie, if the enemy is running away from you and you can't connect with Vi, of course you don't do damage, right? So Annie was surviving, and then the stun came in. Lee Sin 201 was, of course, game breaking all things considered. You can't really fall behind if you're playing these melee champs around mid. The continuation was a massive dive on top side that also gave a double kill. Lee Sin was then 4-0-1 with a Gore Drinker, and SK was in a winning position for the rest of the game. The key thing here, right, is really happy to see the side of SK that they took the fight to the enemy, 3v3 around mids. I think we saw a very different side to DOS. This was a big question mark when it came to a lot of these bot lanes that have done super well in, of course, the first split. If they are capable of, competing with the best teams in the 3v3 around mids and finding ways to connect with jungle, to take over the mid area and then transfer that to bot rather than playing through bot. Some drafts need you to do that, and in some cases, this is something that teams struggle with. So this is now, if you look at the teams that do this, you see Mad Lions do this, now SK, Australis, and of course, I'm missing did I say SK, Australis, Mad Lions, G2. G2 is the one that I forgot. These are the 4 teams that have shown so far that they actually have good capacity at playing through mid. Vitality won games by either camping top, finding snowballs through bottom side. Like Vitality games have been so one-sided that they could dominate the whole field on their own. So it's not that I am concerned that Vitality won't be able to do this, because I'm sure they will, because they have so much talent and depth. Just that their games have been so easy. You get me? Very easy. But nevertheless, very simple and clean cut. Lee Sin 4-0-1. SK snowballed this game super good. SK's setup around Drake has been very strong. I think that their draft view and how they read their opponent has also been super, super good. I like that a lot. I am excited to see the future of SK. Team Retic versus BDS. I have been critical of, the Kesanta and the Azir, but this is definitely a game where Azir is super, super good because the enemy kind of invites it, right? Here they picked Xayah, Rakan, Vi, and then a Sion on 4. Here, in these cases, in mid, picking a mage is 100% good, right? Xayah is a champion that is very short range. She's picked a lot in this meta, and she's very happy that mages aren't picked that often because they often teams prioritize the Gragas, teams prioritize the Annie, of course. And this is an additional detail as to why, of course, Xayah is doing well. But this was a very good Azir spot, even though I've been a Ruby hater, when he picks Azir. I think this Azir spot is super, super good. You already know this game is going to be full front to back when the Sion is locked in on 4, and then the Wukong and the Gragas flex into topside. And I think that's perfectly fair. I think this draft was good from Team Heretics. I think that if the game, plays out in a more standard manner, that I think that definitely, I think blue side has a lot of good odds in this game. So Gragas first pick, we love that. Xayah, the follow-up 1-2, considering all the bans, Draven, Zeri, and Ashe. I think Xayah Slam is perfectly fine. You don't expect the enemy team to want to play the range supports. They match with the Aphelios Thresh and then the Vi on 3. Gnar, Gwen, ban kind of signal that you're looking to pick Sion on 4. But this also, I think BDS just had this pre-planned, Even Adam said that they scrimmed this, and you did this in scrims a lot, and no one cancelled his TP. I think maybe, Adam, you shouldn't give this type of information on how you're scrimming. But I guess he felt after the game, and they showed the strategy, that they feel fine doing so. But I would have probably saved this, and I would have probably done this against one of the better teams. Because I think the strategy is interesting enough for it to work. But all in all, Azir, Wukong, Victor. So for those who missed the game, what happened in the game was that Vi and Sion put a ward. They made sure they have a ward on the enemy blue. They knew that the enemy starting on the blue. The enemy team didn't wander both side jungle, and Sion and Vi just started Raptors together. And then they did red together. And then they did golems together. And yes, Sion stuck around the entire duration. So the idea is that if you have a pushing bot lane, like in this case, Xayah can push into Aphelios Thresh, because, you basically can trade HP for push if you want to, but you don't really care about your HP if you're setting up for this dive. You crash 2 waves, and then you look to dive on that wave. And then the play is like Gragas on top, usually pushes, to be ready for this, because he should recognize that this is happening. And then the continuation is that you threaten the dive, Gragas TPs, and then Sion TPs top, and then Gragas has to base. And then, of course, he's going to lose what he gained, but the difference is that Vi actually took jungle camps on the bottom side. Disaster struck because Sion got cancelled. I think there is potential in that play to also just commit all the way, just start tanking the turret with Sion and, just go all in. I think even if Gragas TPs, I think that potentially you can kill here and find lethal because Sion could just tank and then die with passive. And I think if you kill the enemy AD and then you TP top with Sion, I think that outcome is even better. But of course, I think that the guaranteed value play is also good. But of course, Sion got cancelled on the TP, and that's a disaster. It's a disaster because the wave crashes top. You can't TP top with Sion, and the follow-up is, of course, that the wave is bouncing to Gragas. So Gragas is not losing anything because usually Sion TPs top and then he pushes top wave all the way in before Gragas arrives, and then he's going to bleed what, of course, Sion bled before because it's basically a mirror of the previous situation. And then the gain is that, of course, you now have, this massive advantage bottom side. The enemy shared XP, and you took all of these camps for your jungler, and the enemy jungle is kind of feeling awkward about that, right? I think that what Sion did in this game, I think it's something worth to explore. I am very curious. Basically, what I want to do when I come home is I just want to spam support stop. I'm just going to play support stop. And then I am going to leverage the pressure I will have on the map in order to make the enemy push and catch waves. I think there's a lot of potential in that because a lot of super champions are balanced around not having gold, and they are insanely effective in the game. And then sometimes, if you can find the impact to really, really hurt the enemy mid or the enemy bot side while giving up yourself top side, that trade can be massive. And I think this is something that is really, really worth to explore. I think there's a lot of layers to it. In the past, we saw the Galio, we saw the Tarek, we saw the Zac players do it. You can even send your jungler up top to catch waves, and then they're going to potentially be ahead. There's a lot of layers to that can definitely impact early game super, super much. I could see a world where we see variations of this, where imagine you are Rakan support, okay? Rakan top or Braum top. You just late invade the enemy bot side. You win because you outnumber and the enemy top lane is on top. And then you just threaten the dive and you do exactly the same. And then you bounce and TP top. If the enemy freezes, okay, you just walk into mid and you start pressuring. That's definitely like an idea. Maybe we see Janna, maybe we see Braum. These supports are so strong because, as mentioned before, they're balanced around having no gold. So if you generate a bit of gold, that's already like being a very strong version of that champion. Another layer of it is a lot of the supports are balanced around having a lot less experience. And I think that there are situations where, of course, you are very high level as a super player, and that can be fantastic. So I really like the side from BDS. I think that Team Heretics, they did usual Team Heretics things. I think that they showed really like a good setup on Drake 3, which was surprising that BDS gave up. But all in all, that was a moment where BDS showed some of their weakness and Team Heretics showed some form of cohesion. But then there was, a lot of the mistakes that are usually occurring with sometimes they're dying on mid wave, sometimes they're dying on side. But at least, I think this draft was good from Team Heretics, and I think that while Team Heretics is struggling, at least there is a resemblance of hope there in terms of potential growth. I feel bad because this has been a very sickness-stricken weekend for a lot of teams. I know that all of Fnatic are sick. That's why we didn't have the fist bump situation. Jankos is sick. There's some players in many teams that are sick. I can't think of the others. Of course, esports isn't in a position where you have a bench and you can like rest a player out. You just kind of have to deal with your situation, no matter how extreme. And I feel extra bad for Jankos because he played this match of the week on a day with a lot of delays, and my man was playing on stage all the way till the AMs while he was sick and he was looking rough. But today he looked better, but that's just me speculating through the camera. Jankos is a machine. Really like Jankos. I hope that he gets the appreciation that he deserves. But once again, I think Team Heretics had a good draft. They got thrown, a very unique strategy at them, and they try their best to adjust. But BDS showed that they are just simply the better team. I think, once again, beautiful performance from Crowny. He's looking super, super good. Really like Crowny, and I think Lavrov also had some very nice engages. Mad Lions versus Koi. Rejoice. This one is super, super big. Mad Lions with the Caitlyn, Ashe, Renata Glask ban. I think that's cool. I like the Renata Glask ban because I think I had a thought around this. I'm trying to figure out what that thought was. Why did I like the Renata Glask ban? Well, of course, it's a combo together with Kalista, and that is, of course, something that Koi likes to play. There's another reason, but why am I blanking on it now? Oh, yeah. Renata's pretty good into Rakan. That's what I wanted to say. But Koi went for Gragas ban, Irelia ban, Zaya ban, and they wanted to trade enemy first pick for a Jace. That was their strategy. They wanted to deny Chasey Jace, and they wanted to give Shigenda another run at the mill. So Koi is the only team in the league that is willingly dropping bot lane every single game, and that is something that has worked well from them in the past. But I think it also kind of shows that Koi is fairly limited in what they are playing in topside. Koi now tried to replay the Silas, even though yesterday didn't look that great. Larsen seems to be having a little bit of an identity crisis because in the end, this is a blind pick Silas on 3. It's not like Jace Sejuani 1-2-3 is not like Jace Sejuani Silas. It's not like a weak 1-2-3, but the ultimates aren't like super exciting in terms of what Silas had access to in this game, right? So Annie is followed by Lee Sin and then Zeri. So this is a nice way to support your Annie lock-in because Annie has good synergy with Lee Sin if you want to send Annie mid. And of course, Zeri Annie is something that is very, very playable, and you can set up your bans accordingly. And then the follow-up was that they banned Rakan and Nautilus to set up the Annie supports. And then they just slammed K'Sante Talia because they just felt they had a better answer into the Silas that was showing that Draven was coming in on 4. And Draven, is a champion that has had a lot of success. I think is better into the Xayah lanes. I think Zeri can, fight back a little bit, play on distance and play on range. But all in all, I think a big issue here is just the Soraka on 5. I think this champion will not be able to leverage Draven's strengths hard enough in lane in this matchup, and you're always going to be a target. The biggest strength of Lee Sin, for those who hate Lee Sin out there, Lee Sin can cover so much distance in his gank, where you can be CC'd out of Fog of War and Lee Sin can always reach you. It's very hard to ward against Lee Sin unless you have like concrete information on where his camps are. That's why you always want to pair him together with champions that have a lot of CC. Here there's, the Annie on bot, and that was the target. So even Soraka standing in the middle of the lane, she's playing safe. Annie flash stuns, and then Lee Sin just walks through lane. You didn't spot him yet. W into Q, connects, and then he just flies. He's basically walking into lane with a goddamn Nocturne ult. This is the distance that Lee Sin covers. The strength of Lee Sin is that he can pick his fights. If you're too weak to pick any fights, this is where Lee Sin sucks ass, right? So you need to pick champions that want to actually skirmish and can set that up against the enemy champions when it's locked in. K'Sante, this was a beautiful game from Sihasi. He was snowballing, beautiful, ganks into bottom side. Very nice here. Mad Lions managed to adapt it the first 2 days of struggles. The Mad Lions hype train, is back on board. It was against a very weak Koi, but, at least they showed a lot of new flair connected to, of course, the new patch. And I think that's positive and that's good. So, big up Mad Lions. Koi, same issues as yesterday. Just that Malang is not really finding any value and is slowly falling behind. Bot lane is struggling. I think they're having an identity crisis. Larsen with a very limited pool. And then Shigenda, is picking Jason and trying his absolute hardest. But Koi is definitely having a lot of issues right now. And I hope that Comp and Trimby, I'm pointing to them because I believe that they have the highest potential as players on this team. And I think if they're going to switch it up again, it needs to be through them. G2 versus XL, for those who want to hear it, I actually casted the first 12 minutes of this game because I won a competition, because I am just much better than Gulbori and Shox at knowing what Caps is playing in solo queue. I'm just, no trophy, but I did win the award of going, on the cast. So that was cool. I enjoyed that. This game, once again, Hans Usama gets Dr. Raven. That's crazy. Let's look at the bans first, though. We have Jace, Ashe, Annie. So Jace is something that a lot of teams are banning against EXO. Odoamne likes to play it. I know that also, of course, Bruder Musas in the mid lane. Eviteo also likes to play it, so that's a ban that we see often. Followed by Ashe, Annie, and then Sejuani, Caitlyn, Heimerdinger. And I think that the setup here for XL is that I think that their plan was to take Draven themselves, or they were planning to just trade it for Gragas. I don't think it's that crazy of an idea, honestly. I think they were hoping that the enemy would first pick Gragas and they would be able to slam Draven themselves, but Mickey played with Patrick in the past. He knows this inside and out. So I think it was a very greedy play to look for. I think also banning Heimerdinger really sets up for a very strong blind pick Thresh. So I think that's also something that you need to really, really kind of reconsider. Because at least, if the enemy goes Draven and then let's say they pick Heimerdinger blind, I think that you can pick some range supports into that and fight back. But maybe this is not something that Limit is comfortable with. At least, with what Limit played in the past, all of his champions are rather weak into Heimerdinger, so that's okay, right? So they give the Draven away. I think they just wanted to pick Draven 1-2 themselves. I think that was the whole plan. That's why I think the Caitlyn ban came in, even though G2 played one game of Caitlyn and it was a losing game, right? They slam Nautilus on 3, which is fine in the Thresh, but the Jarvan comes in. It's a very nice Thresh Jarvan rotation because you deny the way Aphelios can create safety for himself, right? You slam Thresh because Heimerdinger is out, there's no counter, and then Jarvan, together with Thresh, you can deny the Aphelios, and also Jarvan can follow the game plan of Draven and Thresh. Just be very active around bot, take Drakes easily, and enjoy the game. Olaf Lissandra 4-5 ban, which was, the Lissandra ban was kind of strange. I don't know what that was about. But Yasuo, Jax, okay, that was something. They just lock in two champions they believe are stronger to Gragas. So there's the Kled, there's the Cassiopeia, and they're like, yo, send Gragas somewhere, we're going to do fine. I'm a big fan of Cassio. If you check my solo queue account right now, I've just played 9 games Cassio straight. I think Cassio can cheat a lot of lane phases for herself due to the strength of Catalyst in lane. And I think that's super, super cool. I'm happy to see more and more Cassio from Caps. I think this is a champion that you can pick in more and more locations than before, especially with mages looking a little bit weaker right now and not too fast in the meta. I think Cassio is something that compositionally does super, super well into a lot of champions. So we have Vi, Cassiopeia, Kled. We're just going to, attack the Gragas wherever he shows up. And then the Ahri on 5. So XL, they picked something that is very simple to execute. I think that, XL are definitely showing a lot of hints and signs that they want to have just draft compositions that are very streamlined in what they want to achieve in the game, which I think is, a good way to start because they are, of course, working from behind. So I can understand this approach. But in the end, you give G2 Draven. I think they would lose against other champions too. So I don't want to harp on this point too much. But I can understand what they were going for. In the end, they got Gragas for it, right? And they picked Aphelios and the Draven. I don't think that's horrible. I think that's completely, completely fine. So even though everyone's going to say, oh, you gave Draven, they first picked Draven for Gragas, right? And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think it's fair to assume, oh, you're going to ban Draven and then the enemy first picks Gragas and we don't have anything to pick 1-2, that they're going to just win the game, right? That's like completely like delusional to think about. Maybe you trade Gragas, the enemy, and you get Xayah Rakan and then the enemy picks Aphelios Thresh. That's maybe a game that the enemy doesn't want to play, meaning XL. This game, it was very quickly decided through, just a Rift Herald fight where all of the juice by XL was burned on a Jarvan that was kind of baiting and inviting the enemy to go. And if you commit deep on a champion that actually gets his EQ and his ult off, he's kind of completed his job. if you have to commit so deep that champions like Kled and Cassio can just stay in the fight and keep hitting you, then usually you will lose even though you bursted someone. You bursted someone that used all of his juice already, right? So this fight, I think if you wanted to go for it, you need to invite the Javan to go a little bit deeper, would have been better. I want to add as well, that in this moment too, there was a big 2v2 on bottom side. Mickey did a very good job of flaying the Nautilus Q, so he couldn't get away, and they traded 1-for-1 with the Draven cash out, and all of a sudden you had such a big swing of gold in the favor of G2, and I think Exo's composition really couldn't fight back anymore because Cassio had Mythic, Draven had Mythic, and the game was just lights out. When G2 are ahead, they are a very, very nice team to watch in terms of how well they snowball their leads. There was some fighting around top side as well, where they tried to gank Kled, and he was just 1v2ing, so everyone on G2 was really, really enjoying themselves in this one. But I can understand the direction that Exo is heading in. Fnatic, they banned Jace, Annie, Draven. Okay, I think Vitality, banning Draven against Upset is really funny, but I know that he's really great Draven. I remember we scrimmed, we won 2 games against T1 2021, and that was playing Draven and then playing Aphelios. So Upset just has a very complete champion pool. Vitality ban Aurelion Sol, Varus, and Caitlyn. Okay, they're banning just the lane supports, and I think the idea here is that either they get Zyra Khan themselves or they just pick Aphelios into Zyra Khan. I think that's plain and simple what Vitality is looking for. And I think that inviting the Ashe first pick is super good. I think here Fnatic should for sure first pick Gragas and just let the enemy pick Ashe, because once again Varus and Caitlyn is out, so the synergies with Ashe support are very limited. I think Gragas first pick is just far superior right now, and we've seen that over the course of all the games. So yeah, Xayah gets taken away. That's another champion that, I don't know if Reckless would play Aphelios. I think I guess they just pick Zeri into Xayah, which I think is perfectly fine. I think Zeri is very strong at the patch, so it's okay. They pick Vi, but once again, it's Vi into Gragas Xayah. That's not super exciting. The Xayah already has a lot of counterplay against Vi, so you're picking Vi, and I guess he just didn't really feel like running back under the Seju game, and he just wants to pick a champion that can potentially compete in the 2v2 around mid. So, Talia Victor 4-5, just ban mages and then slam the Azir. This is a good way of denying, a lot of the champions that you could imagine Humanoid have success with. And then a Humanoid just slammed a LeBlanc, and then they blind pick Ornn, which is Fnatic showing that they've gone full circle at this point. It's like they brought Oscarinin into the weekend, and then they realized that nothing is really working, and then he just slammed, some champion, to try to stabilize top lane in some shape or form. And then Camille was locked in. So, looking at this game, first and foremost, what happened top, Oscarine was getting murdered. I don't remember the last time I saw an Ornn get solo killed against Camille at min 3. That's completely crazy. Completely crazy. I feel bad for Oscarine because I think the way he was brought into the LEC, he clearly isn't ready. He clearly isn't ready, and I think that a lot of pressure to take in. The roster is dysfunctional as a whole, and I think that this roster needs a complete reboot. I feel like this about every single player. I feel like all of these players could potentially perform better in just a different team. It's so hard to work with all of that tension from the past weighing in on every single day. Whenever something goes wrong, you can begin to relive the patterns that have been established through the painful memories. And Fnatic is really, really having a hard time. I feel bad for Oscarinin, but I also feel bad for the rest of the players. I think that they are stuck now in a loop that doesn't really allow them to reinvent themselves. And I think that you begin to overthink, overcompensate, and you lose all the things that are good about yourself, So it was a very rough weekend for Fnatic. Once again, Oscarinin got murdered by Photon, naturally. And also, like, YamatoCannon laning against Ashe and Zeri, like, Zeri was just eating feathers in lane, and when I see this, she was just dropping potions for no reason, and the lane phase definitely looked rough. Like, they burned summoners, 2v2, like YamatoCannon burning summoners against Ashe Zeri early game. It's like when Rakan has flash and Gragas has flash, you can just go fuck yourself, It's really, really rough. And then LeBlanc is playing. LeBlanc against Azir with Vi jungle. In isolation, Azir wins this, and he can just also just spit on the LB and buy Mercs. And if Azir buys Mercs, then like LeBlanc just doesn't win this matchup in isolation, and the game was already over before Vi reaches level 6. So it was a disaster altogether. What can Fnatic do? I really don't know. I hate to say it, but I really don't know. I feel bad for each individual, even the coaching staff I feel bad for, because I think this is just a situation where each player kind of just needs a refresher, and needs to find a dynamic. But maybe there's something that I'm missing, The rumors had it that Fnatic did better in scrims than they showed on the weekend stage, but so many different pressures you need to get used to and be really prepared for when you are going to make that jump. And usually when you make that jump, you want to feel like you're taking a leap of faith rather than being pushed down, And maybe that's what the context here of Fnatic is. But we will see. Making changes between winter and spring is definitely not easy for anyone, including the organization, because even though, I've been critical and so forth, like your options are so limited. And with how spring went, with how winter went, I think to expect that spring is going to look super different is not something that you can really do. But I think that my read is that each player on this roster just needs to kind of find a way to start over, because the key nature of the dynamic needs to be started over, But we shall see. Vitality, on the other hand, Jesus, complete slaughters this weekend. They, were doing super good in scrims. I know that. If I say that and I give you a little hint, that it was, I don't know how I can say this without revealing it, but allowing people that are smart to figure it out, I think you can figure it out. Vitality is looking super fucking strong, and I think G2 has some real competition this split. Jesus, we have SK popping off, Australis looking dangerous, Vitality looking dangerous, and then of course G2 looking dangerous. The best thing here about all of this, right, is that in a scenario where Koi drops down, if Koi drops down, very positive for Vitality fans. I'm holding back a sneeze, that's why I'm not talking. Okay, it came out as a yawn. These videos always become so degen at the end. Jesus Christ. All right. What was I saying? Fuck my life. I was saying, yes, Koi being bad and Mad having a hard time is very good for Vitality. Yes. There are, of course, scenarios where Vitality gets second place and they don't go to MSI, and that would suck for everyone. That would suck balls for everybody. And the fact is, I think that maybe we need to rethink the format a little bit, because you want to send the team with the best form in playoffs to MSI. I think that should be weighed a little bit heavier than what we've seen so far. I think maybe we need to increase the spring points, and then I think that we should increase the summer points as well. But of course, the format is locked in and they're not going to make any changes, right? It would be very sad if, like, let's say Mad Lions get 5th place or 4th place and they're looking really weak, and then they qualify to MSI because Vitality can't beat G2 in a final. That would be very disappointing. But of course, Mad Lions, of course, I don't want to put all that weight on them. It just happens to be that they're in the situation where they got second in winter and all eyes are on them. I just don't want that situation to appear when there's going to be a meme about how Mad Lions didn't win a best of 5 in spring and qualified to MSI. But I have high hopes for my boy Hilly. I hope Kazi can find his head and we see some of those performances that we saw in, of course, winter. I'll be streaming. I'll be doing, I guess this will be released on the day that I'm recording it. I am going to do Voice of Yamato with Mac, which is the coach of Mad Lions. We will then, later in that same evening, we're going to review. Potentially, because I'll be very tired, I will do the Voice of Yamato after traveling. Now I need to go to bed and I need to rest. But yeah, the streams will continue. This weekend, we're going to do LEC co-viewing, the upcoming one. So I'm going to invite Wunder, all the homies, the usual business. We will co-stream LCS. We will review the bangers in LCK and the LPL that we missed. All will be beautiful and all will be wonderful. Something I wanted to highlight too is that when playoffs start in the LPL and playoffs start in LCK, we're going to co-stream that bitch. Because, of course, we have the rights for it and it's going to be super giga interesting. So with that being said, I'm going to be signing off. If you sneeze during this video, bless you and bless your face. And finally, VidConnect. That was probably one of the craziest segments I've ever done. I hope it landed. I did a lot of crazy shit today, honestly. Like I did the Conor McGregor interview today on broadcast. I almost swore. I did the VidConnect. I did the casting. I did play the character in some game show. I was all over the place. I am so spent because, I came in with kind of a stress and an anxiety about it, but I was like, Wim Hof, and then boom, just rock and roll. What is the worst thing that can happen? People laugh at you, great. People having a good time either way. Rock and roll, baby. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And if you like the content, you don't need to do anything, honestly. Just that's it. If you got to this point, you probably like the content, or you just hate me and you just want to hate watch me. And I welcome that too. Any form of consumption of my content is welcome. Yeah. Lots of love. Bye-bye. And enjoy Tenki. I hope it's not too much of a mess.